All right, Professor Halperin, give me a grade on last night.
Uh, Immaterial. The people who want him out, you
God, I
know,
wish I had you. I wish I had you as a professor.
people who wanted him out are going to say it doesn't matter either because he was bad or it doesn't matter if he was good, and the people who want him in are going to say he was good enough. That performance, that level of performance without Atlanta would have been gone unnoticed because he's been behaving like that with all of its indications of his decline for years. But in the current context, Republicans were delighted that he did well enough to stay in because they want him in. Democrats who want him out were sad because he didn't do poorly enough to make it apparent he had to go. And
Yeah,
so
I think that.
I think in the arc of will he stay or will he go, it's a net plus for him because between that performance and the Marist NPR poll showing him ahead nationally, I think he ends yesterday and into this morning more secure than he's been all week.
Yeah, I got to admit, the tone of last night did not sound like a guy who has any reservations about his commitment to stay in this race. It was very defiant, very clear that he feels he's got the track record and the level of accomplishments to move forward. I didn't see any hint of somebody who's acknowledging, in the very least, any call to get out.
Yeah, I think they coached him to not be any more defiant than he was, right? Because I could have seen angry old manish. But except for sort of not being super defiant and criticizing his, he expressed sympathy for the members of Congress who were running for their predicament, right? Like I get it, they're down ballot, they don't want to lose. But on the two central points, the two central arguments that those who want him to step aside make, he said, I'm not behind in the polls, which people snickered at when he first started saying it, but we've now had two polls, the Washington Post poll and the NPR poll, that show him ahead or even. And then the other point is he's saying still the fiction that Atlanta was a one-off and dodged the question of, why aren't you taking a cognitive test? Because whether you were president or not, you could use a cognitive test. He took defiant positions on those 2 points, both of them arguable. And, again, possession's 9/10 of the law. He has all the delegates. They can't make him give them up. He's going to have to
Right.
voluntarily choose that. And as you said, nothing he did in the press conference suggests he's even thinking about giving them up.
So, Mark, what I want you to explain real quick for people watching right now who say, okay, let's just look at what happened Thursday night. By every account, it was a disaster politically for Biden. He then has his base, or at least part of his base. I'm not the Hollywood base led by George Clooney. Some of these House Democrats openly calling for his resignation. People like Obama and Pelosi not giving him a full-throated endorsement. If I'm a casual viewer of politics and I'm sitting at home anywhere in America right now, I would assume that there would be a decent shift in polling. Why hasn't there been?
Well, I think there's three explanations for why. Now, I think we got to lay down the predicate. Biden was behind before the debate and had a very narrow path to winning, and the debate hasn't helped him. So saying what we're about to say doesn't mean, this race is super tight. Trump is still ahead meaningfully. Three reasons why the debate may not have helped him. Number one, people are locked in, right? People who don't like Trump are not going to switch away from Biden because they know Biden is the vehicle to beat Trump. Number two, the Biden campaign argued, and they might be right. They argued this on debate night and the next day, that while everybody focused on Biden's mental acuity as it was displayed vividly at the debate, Donald Trump defended his position on abortion, which is unpopular. Donald Trump talked in a style that a lot of independents and other voters don't like. So it's possible that we were too focused on Biden's performance and not enough on Trump's. And then finally, Trump has a ceiling of support. There are people, when they say, I would vote for a slinky in a jar over Donald Trump if those are the choices, they mean it. And so it's possible that, you just have, as a factor in this race, people have strong feelings about Biden, but they also have strong feelings about Trump. And that it's what Biden did in Atlanta was the acuity version of shooting someone on Fifth Avenue. They just not going to care about that because there's other things like Donald Trump that matter more to them.
Let me throw out like a 4A, like a small
Uh,
subset of exactly what you talked about, which is that we're looking at it also to some degree incorrectly. We're looking at these national polls, which again, I get shows momentum and movement. But at the same time, I'm reading about Wisconsin, a battleground state, which shows Trump up 6 points. I'm reading about Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Minnesota that show tight races. When you look at it through the context of a national race, which is what this NPR poll does this morning, you're factoring in the New York, the Californias, the Texases, which are hardcore respondents that weren't going to move. This goes to your first point.
yeah.
But when you actually start to look at it through the path in which you win electorally through these states, it did shift a little. And I mean, I guess that goes to point two, which is a lot of this, when you actually look at how you win, the Wisconsins, the other battleground states, it still is Trump ahead significantly. And these same people will say, well, Trump could win in a landslide electorally potentially. And I think is part of it that we're looking at it incorrectly?
Well, it's possible, although the one Wisconsin poll people seized on rightly, but we don't have enough battleground state data. And I hope if I worked at one of these news organizations throwing money down the drain on national polls, I would have been able to argue either let's give it to charity or let's do two battleground state polls. Imagine, in terms of understanding where things are, which is, I think, the point of these polls. And in terms of getting, pickup for them for media hit, same thing. Why not do Arizona and Pennsylvania rather than a national poll? I don't get it. The only thing I'll say about the national polls is if you looked at the tone and tenor of the coverage of the debate, you would have expected Joe Biden to either collapse nationally or suffer a 3 or 4 point loss. And some of the other national polls do show that. But
I think about it. I think about it like this. Let me also pose this. Let's just play this out for a second to your point about a national poll. Let's say George Clooney's at home in LA and the phone rang Friday morning and it said, "Who are you supporting for president?" I still think he would say on the phone to the pollster, Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, my point is that even the folks that are saying they don't want him to run aren't saying they wouldn't vote for him. They're saying, I would rather have a replacement. Yeah. And that dynamic matters. It's not that they're saying they won't vote for him. This is not a never Trump type of vote.
100%.
It's saying I'd rather replace him.
100%. And including, for all we know, we'll write him a check in the fall if he's still the nominee. Right. I think you're absolutely right. And if the Washington Post poll is not just completely messed up, people say, the Post headline on the poll was, 75% of people think Biden should step down or doesn't have the acuity. I forget what it is. It doesn't matter because they could, you could, to your point, there are plenty of voters who believe two things. Joe Biden has no business being president given his level of mental acuity. And if the choice is Biden versus Trump, they'll still vote for him. Now, there's some people I've talked to after the debate. Mark McKinnon is one of them, who said, I was going to vote for Biden. I'm not going to vote for Trump now, but I'm not going to vote for Biden. I can't in good conscience vote for Biden. And so not vote write-in, vote for Kennedy, whatever it is. People thought there'd be more of that, right? And the Marist poll and the ABC, NPR poll and the Washington Post poll suggest, no, your point of view. I wish that we'd have a new nominee, but if Biden's the nominee, of course I'm going to vote for Biden over Trump.
It's kind of the same dynamic on a lot of Trump voters, right?
Exactly.
Which is, I don't love Donald Trump, but given the choices, I'm with him. And it's not saying I want him. It's saying I'll vote for him. We had this dynamic that we talked about in 2016 called upshifting the downshifters, getting people to vote for Trump who weren't necessarily enthralled with him, but didn't like Hillary Clinton. And we said, hey, it's a binary choice. You got to vote for somebody.
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. And I intended to make that point in responding to, and I failed. But yeah, I mean, you could think of a million things to say about Trump. His position on abortion, his social media practices, his behavior on January 6th. If you ask in a poll, do you approve of Trump's behavior on January 6th? Lots of Trump voters would say no. But if the choice is Biden-Trump, they'll still vote Trump.
All right, so let's just walk through, because I think you've made this point over and over again, correctly so. These are Biden's delegates, okay? So if you are a Democrat right now, you're George Clooney, you're whomever, and you want him to step aside, what is the potential timeline look like for a glimmer of hope if you want your wish to come true?
Right. We don't know the exact timeline because the Democrats have to have some committee meetings later in July to set the date for this unprecedented or unusual virtual roll call, which they're doing, they say, to make sure that Biden can get on the Ohio ballot, because Ohio might change their law in a way that if they waited to nominate him in a traditional roll call at the convention would be too late. So that date will probably be in late July. And obviously, something could happen after he's nominated virtually, but before the convention, or even after the convention, that could necessitate a swap out. But it's going to be a lot harder. The bar is going to be even higher to get him to agree to a swap out. So I think they have a couple of weeks to about or so to convince him that it's not in his interest, or the party's interest, or the nation's interest to run. And a week of that will be taken up by the Republican convention, when it'll be harder to have pressure. And Congress is gone now. And so could the pressure somehow be created with Congress out of town? Much harder to do because they're not together. They're not as prone to create some sort of beehive activity. I think literally now, in using the best imagination I have, only an investigative story that said they lied about his diagnosis and his treatment. I think that's the only thing I can think of now that would have to occur between now and the roll call that could make this go in a different direction than it currently is.
Since you brought that up, do you think it was odd last night that not one question about the doctor or diagnosis? I mean, you've got this New York Times reporting and the New York Post reporting about this Parkinson's doctor. The White House seemingly caught in at best a contradiction, if not a lie, about the role of Dr. Kennard, this neurologist / Parkinson's expert. Not one question about his medical history or current treatment.
Yeah. I was not a big fan of the wording of the questions. I thought the wording of the questions was extremely flabby, not focused, too long, too many yes/no questions, which you should never ask anybody in any press conference or interview. I just, with all due respect to the reporters who got called on, I thought the topic you raised and several others, well-crafted, short questions would have been a lot better than the flabby, meandering, aimless ones that didn't produce information for voters.
What other question do you think was missed last night?
Well, I would have just. I think there's several questions regarding his both the examinations he has gotten, but also, again, I didn't spend the time crafting the language, but I think a question like this, which is, you obviously have shown signs of loss of mental acuity. How could it be that you don't want a cognitive exam? How could your family not insist that you have a comprehensive cognitive exam so you could be clearly diagnosed? Number one. Number two, you've not made either your doctor or any imaging you've had done of your brain available to the public. How can you justify that as commander-in-chief who's asking for 4 more years? Would have asked those. And then I would have asked him to be more introspective and say, you've acknowledged that you don't talk the way you used to, you don't move the way you used to, but walk us through your full understanding of the degree of your decline.
Why? You know, it was interesting because I had the same thought you did about the questions. I thought they were sloppy. They didn't allow for a good answer. Is it, in your experience, you've been in multiple newsrooms, are these reporters coming up with them themselves for a press conference of this magnitude, or is the bureau chief or other folks helping to craft it? Because, like, let's say that you're Reuters or the AP or the New York Times or NBC News. You know you're getting a question, okay? So who's involved in crafting it? Does the correspondent generally have complete carte blanche to craft it? Do they run it by someone, or does it come from up high?
It ranges. It depends on the news organization, the person, their relationship with their colleagues. The range of people they might get help from could include a spouse, their colleagues on the beat. In other words, they all have multiple people covering the White House, a bureau chief, an executive in New York if it's a New York-based organization. It varies every time. But some correspondents who are very experienced, whatever, they just do it themselves. I always would write it down. Again, no yes, no questions. no question they're expecting, no question they've been asked, as short as possible. And then I would do that myself. And then I would always show it to at least one person I trusted to let them help me workshop it to make sure, is it as short as possible? And does it maximize the chances of getting a good answer? Or if they dodge the question, the fact that they dodged the question is put in the sharpest possible relief.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because there's so many times when I'm with you, I'll bounce some stuff off because people would say to me, if I were asked that, this is how I'd answer it. I'd say, wow, that's actually a really good response.
Yeah.
I got to get this tighter. And I felt like last night was really sloppy. Let me kind of move on to the Kamala factor here. They leaked out that they were testing Kamala Harris's prowess against Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Is that because they want to undermine Kamala and say, see, Joe Biden does the best, which is what a lot of reporting suggested this morning, that he's still the best Democrat? Or is it they wanted to force Biden's hand by saying, actually, Kamala does better?
I couldn't get anyone to tell me, but I'm pretty sure it's the former.
So what does that say, though? And I'm being serious. Like, I mean, my partisanship is well known, that this guy is the best Democrat. I find it, to be completely honest, I find this really odd that you're saying the guy like at this, when you test every Democrat in the country right now, this is the best that they can do?
Well, look, he's ahead in the Marist poll. So, I've said for a long time, he should have gotten that long ago. But at this point, he may well still be the strongest. And the polling backs that up. Harris's polling is a little bit legit because people know her, but she's not been seen in the light that they would try to cast her with a big launch and image crafting. But she's done well in some of these polls, better than Biden. The other people, they're totally unknown. There's just no way to poll them. You could focus group them and show people video, but these other polls are ridiculous. I agree with Joe Biden, and he said this last night. It was one of the, I thought, more undercovered elements of the press conference, and his team has been saying it to donors and electeds, which is, you think these people can, from a standing start, walk right in and beat Donald Trump? Like, Biden is a known quantity with a campaign structure that's built, with a donor network, with a team that understands how to win presidential elections. None of these other people have anything like that, including the vice president for the most part. So there's lots of things that make a strong presidential candidate. Having extreme mental decline put on vivid display is not one of them. And the others don't have that. But they don't have a lot of things that Joe Biden has that make him a strong presidential candidate compared to them.
Yeah, I agree. That's the thing. I don't think people appreciate this. For a lot of other reasons, I want Joe Biden to stay in the race. We know him as a candidate, that his record, et cetera, et cetera. All right, a couple more things I want to cover quickly. For all the people who are trying to push him out of the race, I've made the case to the audience before. I don't think he really cares what Obama says. I don't know that he cares about what anyone but Jill, maybe Valerie, his sister, maybe a couple of the top aides, the Donnellan, Richettis, et cetera. But here's what I don't get. If you're Barack Obama and you know him and you know, like, what is Obama doing right now? I feel like this is literally back in the Trump days of backstabbing the guy, trying to undermine him. Like, it's like he sends out this tweet, and then Obama basically, from all the reporting, is having conversations with Pelosi and everyone else, trying to say, yeah, we got to replace the guy and I got concerns. Is it just that I want to be clear for history, I didn't like him?
I just speculation, but I think he uses the justification that, well, if I press Joe, it'll only get his back up to, continue to just enjoy his life and not be particularly involved. His phone's ringing off the hook. People would like him to get involved, but I think, from my sense of things, is he's saying, I forced the guy not to run in 2016. He resents me.
Yeah, but it's leaking out. I guess what I'm asking, Mark, is it's leaking out that he is saying, I don't have confidence in him.
Yeah, but
if you're Biden,
but he hasn't
you're
had confidence in him, and he hasn't confidence in him ever, and he hasn't had confidence in his winning this race for a year. So that's not new. All we know he's done is he sent out a positive tweet. He talked to Pelosi at least once, and he signed off on the Clooney op-ed. Otherwise, I think he's just looking down at his cell phone and seeing donor people who gave him a lot of money or raised a lot of money for him, calling him up. And he's like, whatever, not my job, man.
Let's switch gears real quick. Donald Trump, he still has to make a VP selection. When do you think he makes it, and who does he select?
I've narrowed it down to two, according to my sources. It's either Sunday in the Midwest, J.D. Vance, or it's Professor Plum in the conservatory with a candlestick.
The candlestick.
I think
Oh,
I think it's JD Vance. Just all my sources are telling me that he didn't feel super totally in the end super comfortable with Rubio, kind of on an interpersonal basis, and Burgum just is too risky, could end up like Sarah Palin in a suit. So I think it's Vance.
So when do you think we get the tell if it's in the Midwest? He's got to fly somewhere. Does he have a pre-scheduled event?
He's got an event in Pennsylvania on Saturday, but he can go wherever he wants after that. He doesn't have press traveling with him.
Right, but he's got to plan something. I mean, I remember I was part of that when we did it in 2016, and everybody knew what was going on.
Yeah, they could throw on an event at the last minute. The advanced people could have it all worked out.
All right. Last thing I want to touch on: you and I and are getting a band together on Monday. Since it's my show, I'll let you be you can announce it on this. What are we doing and why?
8:30 every weekday starting this Monday, first day of the convention, 8:30 Eastern time, 25 minutes, the morning meeting. It's based on the network, television networks' morning calls, whether it's Fox or NBC. They do these morning calls, which are one of the great ways for people to know what's happening. What's on the schedule that day with Biden, with Trump, everything else that's going on. When are they happening? What do we expect to have happen at those events? What's the narrative line of the day? Who's going to win the day? What news stories are out there that people are tracking? So Tim Hogan, Democratic strategist, the two of us will convene everybody on our new platform, Two Way. You can watch it on Two Way. You can watch it live on your platform, Sean, or on Two Way's platform. And it's a chance to start your day, whether you've got business interests in the outcome of the election, whether you're just a political junkie. Start your day with us to get great insight. I don't think you'll be able to get anywhere and be able to ask us questions, because this platform is about letting people ask questions. So you'll be able to hear us talk for a bit about what's going on, and then you'll be able to ask us or offer your comments.
Yeah, I'm really excited. As I've said to you before, it's kind of interesting. You've created the Note. You've led this effort among networks to get together in these calls wherever you've gone and kind of get everyone attuned to what's happening, what the big decisions are, what the big moments are going to be that day. I've been on the receiving end. I've then gone after those calls. I get all the reporters to call and say, this is what we want to know about, what's happening. And so to be able to provide people insight as to what's going to happen on any given day in a very concise way that they can participate on every morning is going to be fascinating. So as we head into the conventions, and you guys want to know what's happening, again, Mark's platform, my platforms, Tim, we're going to really give you that concise 25-minute interactive way of understanding the day. I look forward to it. Mark, as always, thanks for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you Monday morning.
Thank you, Sean. 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. We'll see everybody there on the morning meeting.
You bet. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.